Okay guys, this is my Srt-4. I have owned it for 2 years now. It is basically all stock, and I was going to go ahead and just kind of give you my opinion on it, and kind of a short quick review of the 2 years I've owned it. Obviously after owning it for 2 years, the novelty's kind of worn off a bit, but it's still a fun car to drive and I'd still recommend it. Like I said, this is basically all stock. As far as performance, I mean, you know, it gets like 30 miles per gallon and it's still relatively fast. And it probably makes 230, 240 horsepower, so I think is what they were out of the factory. And so it's torquey for a 4-cylinder. Front-wheel drive kind of gets old if you want an actual fast car. It's kind of hard to put the power down. Even this will spin tires in first and sometimes second if I was flooring it. I know, pretty solid car. It's not the fastest thing out there, but it's a nice compromise between horsepower and miles per gallon. But I'd recommend it if you're looking for something, as a daily driver, but still want kind of a fun car. The turbo is really tiny, so like I could spool, like I'm at 2,000 RPM if I were to floor it. It spools that fast. And I mean, it's enough power to put your head back in the seat just a little bit, but not a ton, Yeah, I'll go ahead and, okay, he's gonna turn in front of me. We'll go ahead and I'll floor it here. I'm not on the power band either, right here. Alright, so this is my Neon. Like I said, I owned it for 2 years. But here's the stock sounding exhaust. I'll go ahead and rev it up for you guys, but as you can hear, it's not like too obnoxious or anything by any means, but it's like loud enough to where it sounds good at the same time. But that right there is the stock exhaust. Like I said, it's loud and loud enough to sound good, but not loud enough where it's too obnoxious or anything by any means. I'll go ahead and turn it off. We'll show you the engine bay. And for like a modern front-wheel drive car, there's actually quite a bit of room to do work. Like I said, this is all stock, but I mean, besides if you're gonna put a big turbo on, everything else is relatively pretty easy to get to. But that's that. Okay, so here's the interior, and the interior is alright. You have to remember it's a $20,000 car when it was new, so it's going to be a little bit cheaper, and there are things that feel cheap about it sometimes, but overall it looks pretty good. And there's a lot of like mid-range price cars I've driven in whose interior, in my opinion, is worse than this. Example, the Mustang GT I owned, I always thought new edge Mustangs had the ugliest interior, but this looks pretty decent. They kind of have like sportier seats. They're relatively comfortable. Some people say they're not. It's something you guys sit in. I'm a bigger guy. I find it comfortable. A lot of people say they like them, but there's a few people that don't. Kind of hugs you here and there, so it holds you in there. So it's like kind of, I think they're called Viper seats. It's kind of almost a racing seat kind of thing, but door panels aren't that flimsy. They kind of look cheaper, but I mean, what are you gonna expect? It's still a Neon. But front, this looks really good. I love the way the cluster looks in there. I wouldn't change it. It shifts pretty smoothly. None of the controls on the radio or anything are like, annoying or anything. We're just plain Jane radio with a couple heater controls and whatnot. But shifting is pretty smooth. It's nothing too crazy. A little bit notchy. As you can tell, this is where a driver would normally be sitting, because I actually kind of sit close to the close up for someone my size. So if someone smaller sat in this would probably be about where they're sitting at. This would plan on sitting up real close, but I'm 6 foot tall, long torso, kind of shorter legs, and I'm a little cramped in here. But it still does have a back seat and is functional, and I've taken this on 3 or 4 hour road trips with 5 people in it, so it's not impossible. It's just a little bit uncomfy back here in the back if you get a bunch of people. One weird thing about SRT4s is this. Crank windows in the back, which I find to be super annoying, but just kind of something that they skimped on. I mean, like I said, it's a $20,000 car when it was released. But that's kind of the review of that. One thing I will say is the turning radius on these are actually absolutely garbage. I have never been in a car that has a worse turning radius. If you plan, for whatever reason, I don't know why you would plan on tracking, or actually doing like a road course with a front wheel drive car, especially a turbo car where it has no traction. This is not the car to do that with, because it has no turning radius. I'll say it's fast in a straight line. These run like 14.1 stock, I think. So I mean, not fast, but relatively fast. But that's kind of just a quick review and my thoughts of performance review and interior review of SRT4. All right, if you like this video, go ahead and like and subscribe.